Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. Talking about the Wendigo. Howdy, me again from the Skinwalker Post. This time we'll talk about the Wendigo. Wendigo is actually a spirit that lurks within the frost-covered mountains of the U.S., specifically Algonquin Territory and Great Lakes region. It is in constant search for people. These people usually fit two different demographics, either starving, desperate, poor and cold, or arrogant, selfish, greedy, and gutless. Once it has its victim, it'll possess them. Firstly, it will influence their actions, usually driving them to cannibalism. Then there's the transformation. It's important to note that the whole deer skull thing is a later addition from media and other influences that is not mentioned in mythology and legend. So if you've seen a deer skull Wendigo, you're either lying or you've seen something different, which is more worrisome. Also important to note that the Wendigo, like the Skinwalkers, are not cryptids. A cryptid is an unknown species. Wendigo is a spirit, and the physical Wendigo is basically a human, even though they look like giant corpses. The individual will lose their hair quickly. They become painfully thin to the point where their bones jut out. In some cases, their organs would spill. Their skin loses whatever life and color it had and will become either a ash gray or a sallow yellowish pale. Its hard as of ice. It becomes so hungry it'll bite on its lips until nothing but sharpened yet rotting teeth and gums show. The eyes are sunken and it grows rapidly. Anywhere from 6 to 15 foot tall, it is also stated to grow in proportion to whatever meal it ate. They're quick on their feet and have strength comparable to that of a grizzly bear. They do have their weaknesses. Fire is most famous. After all, it's the most effective with frost-bitten, giant cannibals, and as shown in the tale where a Wendigo kidnaps a boy. The Wendigo gets its legs hacked off, and its head decapitated and its corpse is burned, so it seems enough physical damage to its corporeal could kill them. But with their vast knowledge of the woods and mountainous regions, it'll more than likely be one step ahead, and with voice mimicry it'll lead you to getting lost. It's a perfect mix of savagery and cunning, the apex predator of the north, if you will. And with its ability of voice mimicry, it'll lead any unsuspecting traveler to a violent end. Second story. Northwood's cryptid encounter. I've had this story on my mind for a long time. I've always been a fan of the supernatural and cryptid scene, but never had any standout experiences myself. I've lived in the northern Midwest my whole life, and have come to appreciate the local lore that comes with. This is the story about my first real cryptid experience. It's a long one, but I hope you enjoy. In my late teens, I worked at a camp for a few summers. The camp was massive, with only about 1/5 of it being equipped for hospitality, dining hall, cabins, shower houses, etc., and the rest being wilderness. The land had 6 lakes on it, all connected by small rivers. What made this camp particularly eerie, however, was it was actually built around a Potawatomi burial ground. I won't get into the legends around the burial mounds, but overall, this place checked all the boxes for a B-list horror movie. Now, my job at camp was sort of a catch-all. I was a program director, lifeguard, cook, gift shop manager. Basically, if they needed a role filled, I was the one doing it. It kept me busy, and I had many long days. I would close the gift shop at about 7 each night, then head upstairs to the kitchen. I could walk back to my cabin if I wanted, but the cook hated the dark. Babyface crying hated the dark. So I'd help him with dishes and cutting fruit for breakfast, and then walk him to his cabin. I have one rule though. No flashlights. You can't see very well in the woods if your eyes are focused on a small beam of light. I hated the idea of people or animals sneaking up on us. So every night, in the moonlight, I would walk him to his cabin, then walk the public road to mine. My ulterior motive for taking the public road was, well, I'm a smoker, and we have to be good role models for the kids. No smoking in camp, but they can't tell you what to do on public property. My cabin was right on the edge of the hospitable portion of the land. Miles of marshlands and forests sat behind my cabin, and, fortunately or unfortunately, I had the cabin to myself. But the weird thing was that every night I would be smoking and walking the public road, and I would hear screaming in the woods. It sounded like a woman was being murdered. I brushed it off the first night. There's a public access lake. People get rowdy. Sound carries. Could be a prank, or a fox, or an owl. It's the woods. But it kept happening every night, as soon as I stepped onto that road. I decided not to let it bother me. I had to be up early every day. No sense in chasing noise in the dark. I would get to my cabin, spread some tobacco for the land, and sleep soundly every night. Well, the end of summer came around. It was always bittersweet. You eat 3 meals a day with the same people for 3 months. They start to grow on you. One goodbye tradition we kept up over the years was on the final new moon of the camp season. The ranger would take the staff for a spirit walk. It was always good fun. He'd share the legends of the land with the new staff and try to shake them up. We would hike through the back of the camp, around the marshes and lakes, and see what kind of spooky things we would stir up. We all met at the only street light on the public road that night, but that year the ranger had his rifle slung over his shoulder. We ran into a cougar the year before, and 2 wolves lived in the back property, so I didn't think much of it. The rules are simple. No flashlights. No jingling keys. No running. If you run, we might not find you. They were half to scare people, half true. The woods were thick and the marshes were dangerous. Everything was going smoothly till we reached a river crossing not too far from the public road. It takes you to a clearing, just before the trail reconnects with the road behind my cabin. The moment we crossed the bridge, the woods went dead silent. You could hear yourself breathing. That, my friends, is one of the scariest things that can happen to you in the woods. Silence. And then, just like every night before, a blood-curdling scream ripped across the clearing. One of the new staff was about to take off before myself, and another grabbed his arms. "That's the screaming I've been hearing," I told my boss. "That's the screaming I hear every night." The ranger shushed everyone. The scream came again, louder this time. The ranger whistled in the direction of the noise. It whistled back. Suddenly, the screaming surrounded us. Behind us, to the right, to the left. The group closed in, shoulder to shoulder, not daring to even breathe. The ranger, ever serious and calm, said barely over a whisper, "We're turning around. Take the bridge back to the trail. We're going the long way." So, in hurried steps, we made our way back to the street light that we met under without muttering a word. Once we were in light again, I could tell that the ranger was actually shaken up. This is the same man that was charged by a cougar in the dark and brushed it off. "I need a cigarette." "You haven't smoked in like 2 years." "I need a cigarette." I wasn't about to argue with the man holding a rifle, so I obliged. After a few drags, he muttered, "I don't want to scare anyone, but I know only one creature that can mimic human voices like that." "It's a Wendigo," I said, not even thinking. I was in shock. All summer I walked that road, and this thing was out there, screaming, trying to lure me in. That's when he said that. Yes, he thought the same. He first thought it was one of the neighboring property owners looking for their dog, calling out for them. So he whistled. Then, he explained the gun. All spring, he was finding deer strewn around the property. Not unusual, being the woods and all. But there were so many, and so brutally taken down. He said these things looked like they had been hit by cars. In the middle of the woods. Absolutely mangled. More bizarrely, no other animals would touch them. No tracks that said bear, or wolf, or cougar. He was worried, with something bringing big game down like that. So he brought his rifle. No one said much after that. My boss got sage from her cabin and gave everyone who asked for one a blessing. We were shaken. After that, I changed cabins. I didn't own much in general at the time, so I wasn't troubled in the least to get off the public road. Didn't even care that I had to row out in the middle of the lake to have a cigarette. I wasn't stepping foot on that road, and I'm a little sorry to say I never stepped foot back on that property. Call me superstitious or lily-livered, but I couldn't bring myself to go back into those woods. Not even if you paid me. Third story. My possible Wendigo sighting, Montrose, Colorado. Tonight I was discussing this extremely weird and terrifying experience my friend and I had when we gave someone a ride home. To give into more context of what happened and why I stated possible sighting. I live on the western slope of Colorado and I'm an avid marijuana user, especially when I'm up late with a friend working on a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. So it's really difficult for me to say it's real being under the influence. The strange thing about it is how my friend and I felt and saw. It was in late spring, and we were working on a campaign late in the evening, and we got the munchies. I know, how can we be more stereotypical? My friend only lives 4 blocks away from a gas station, and it can be accessed from side streets. Being under the influence, I did not want to take a main street or go far at all. It wasn't responsible of me, and excusing using side streets doesn't justify it. Again, I know it was irresponsible of me. But moving on, as we were leaving the convenience store, my friend was stopped by a woman he knew growing up, and she was close friends with his mother. She was extremely intoxicated and alone, so my friend offered her a ride home to make sure she got back safe. Now here's where things got really weird. Without conversing with each other, my friend and I both felt like she was not safe to walk. I played this off as being a woman in her 60s or early 70s, intoxicated and completely alone. She claimed it was only up the block away, but it was actually a few miles outside of town. It would have easily taken her over a few hours for her to get home. Being in a small town, we have no Uber, Lyft, and taxis are pretty much triple the price at this hour. So we both felt really off that she was okay to walk that far at 1:30 in the morning. When we get down the road from her place, she asked us to drop her off away from her place so that her boyfriend doesn't see our headlights. This point, I didn't want to go into anything further, and there was so many red flags about the situation, I knew it's best to just drop her off as requested and go back to my friend's house. As I reversed down this single-lane dirt road, I told my friend that I'm going to just pull over before we get back into town because I really needed to use the bathroom, and we then both agreed that she was in a very bad situation tonight. Once I turn around this bend in the road, my headlights shine into a small group of trees and bushes. I noticed this extremely large elk-like creature lowering itself from being exposed from my headlights. I could make out the face, but it wasn't normal like an elk. Large antlers, it came off like dead tree branches. The front legs were inverted, skinny, and extremely long. I could tell because its hind legs and lower half were lower than its upper body. Could have been crouching or sitting though. Upper torso was huge, and I thought I saw stripes on its fur, but my friend said it looked like it was its ribcage exposed. The eyes did reflect from when the high beams exposed it in the trees, and at first, I assumed it was an elk because they're everywhere in this area. But it was extremely huge, easily over 15 foot tall but thin. I didn't immediately react to it and kept driving, but when I did see it, the conversation between my friend and I stopped as if we both saw it and trying to process it. After I pulled off to use the restroom roughly a mile away from where I saw that, I couldn't help but to keep looking down the road, making sure that creature wasn't coming after us. It was a feeling I never experienced before, and when I turned around to get back into the car, I couldn't help but notice my friend staring down the road as well, doing the exact same thing I was doing. I asked him if he saw something as well, and he said what he saw was something that looked like the forest spirit in the Studio Ghibli movie Princess Mononoke, but from hell. At this point, my fear was validated, and I jumped into the car and sped off. The feeling we both had was more than a sense of dread, and almost like we were being hunted, or if we were to investigate it at the time, our lives would have been in danger. I never in my life felt this type of fear before, and it was a new experience that I never in my life was to have. I'm glad she made it safe, and we were in the right place at the right time to give her the help she needed. After that situation, I was informed about her life of substance use and struggles, that it's actually gotten worse over the years. Ever since that night, my friend and I dealt with lots of personal things very similar. Our marijuana use increased to cope with major depression, suicidal ideation, death and family, and just overall rough time since that night. I struggle to claim there is some association with what we saw that night, but it's very strange how our lives got increasingly worse since. I tried doing research on Wendigo and even Skinwalker, but I get a lot of stories that's hard to take in as real encounters and would love to learn more on them. Fourth story. I encountered a creature that feeds on memories. I was not born with the ability to see the memory feeders. It's something that came to me when I was 5. After a beating from my maternal grandfather left me close to death. When I woke up in the hospital, I saw one of the creatures for the first time. At first, I thought it was a bird, looking out at me through the air vent. It made jerky movements and twisted its head at impossible angles. Then, it flattened itself as thin as a stingray and seeped out the vent, entering my hospital room, where it flew down and landed on my grandfather's shoulder as he slept. Then it opened its mouth and stuck its long tongue into his ear. I sat there, holding my hospital blanket tight. I would have screamed, except my lips were so swollen I could barely open my mouth. And so I just sat there, shaking, trying not to make a sound. When the police visited my room and asked my grandfather what had happened to me, he told them, "I don't remember." And he was telling the truth. I work in hospice care now, in a large city. We specialize in family work, and many of our clients are in their 40s and 50s. The creatures love to feed here, because the memories are fresh and whole. Over time, I've learned their habits. They prefer the taste of happy memories, weddings, births, birthdays, graduations. There are some clients they just won't touch. The dying men with no families, with hollow eyes, might as well be rotten meat to the memory eaters. I generally don't interfere with the creatures feeding. My clients are generally so close to death that I figure they have a few memories to spare. What's the harm if a Christmas morning gets forgotten? And if I'm being honest, maybe I've been jealous. Because I'm rotten meat. I search and search, and all I find are bad memories. My mom's OD. My grandparents' resentment. My dad visiting dead drunk, shouting into the night. The feeders avoid me like I'm radioactive. I do try to keep the feeders away from visitors. The creatures can hardly contain themselves when children's footsteps come thumping down the hall, eager to see mom or grandma. If I'm not careful, the creatures will descend from the vents and feed on the first time Emma saw snow, or that Friday Samuel skipped school and cuddled with mom on the couch all day. In general, a vacuum is enough to scare them off. So if I see them eyeing a child's ear, I'll head into the room and get busy, even if it interrupts a tender conversation between mother and son. Sometimes, though, the creatures cling to their victims like addicts, and I have to take more drastic action. I've found that I can grab them by the wings and fling them out the window. Once or twice, I've killed them, snapping their necks, but afterward, the stench smell of sulfur was overpowering, and it took weeks of scrubbing my hands before they felt clean. Overall, I would say we'd had an uneasy truce. Until last week. Last week, a teenage girl snuck in after hours. She was basically an angel in human form. Star student, constantly volunteering at the local humane society. Her dad had been a beloved high school teacher until he drew the wrong card and ended up with stage 4 liver cancer. And he didn't even drink. The girl was convinced that it was Dad's last night on Earth and couldn't bear the thought of him dying without her there. So she snuck into the facility. I'm still not sure how. When I found her, she was sleeping in a chair in her dad's room. And perched on her shoulder was the biggest memory eater I'd ever seen. It was big as a condor, wings stretching maybe 4 feet wide. It knelt over the girl with its worm-like tongue pulsing in her ear as memories flowed down its throat. It met my eyes as it drank, and for the first time since my childhood I was afraid of one. This was no little bird I could fling out the window. This one would fight. This one could kill me. I stood there shaking as the creature stared at me with its black eyes, warning me that one more step would mean death. I started to back away. If I left things as they were, no one would ever know. Even the girl might go through her whole life, never realizing what had happened, what she was missing. Something in me couldn't do it. No matter how much I wanted to run, I wouldn't let myself. And so I charged forward, tacking the creature off the girl. It clawed at me with its talons, ripping my arms. They stung with invisible wounds, like I'd been lashed with invisible whips. It bit at me, too, trying to blind me with its beak. When that didn't work, it unleashed its tongue, licking at my face, its saliva burning me like acid. Holding its body off with my left hand, I reached forward with my right, grabbing the creature's tongue. Then I wrapped it around my arm over and over, gritting my teeth as the acid seeped through my skin. As it did, I began to realize I was forgetting. My mother was the first to go. I still had the awareness of her overdose, but the details began to grow fuzzy. Once, I'd remembered the exact angle of her body, some kind of smell that surrounded her, some kind of last words she'd written. Now they were all disappearing down the creature's throat. And as it ate them, it gagged, like it had eaten shit or vomit. The creature tried to pull away, but I kept holding its tongue. The memories all began to disappear. My grandparents were sucked out little by little until all that remained was some vague bullet points, like they were a movie I'd seen in my youth and then forgotten. Then my dad was gone too, and all the bullying through middle school. The dark things I'd thought about in high school too. The years lost and wandering before I finally got my shit together and made it into nursing school. The creature was weak on its feet now, barely able to stand. And finally it fell to the floor, dead and bloated. Finally, as I unleashed its tongue, a wave of tiredness washed over me, and I closed my eyes. I don't see the creatures anymore. But maybe there are things we're not meant to see. Even now, I can feel the shape of them fading from my mind. I guess that's part of why I'm writing this down, in case I forget them entirely. I'm ready to forget. There's a kind of bliss in it. Ever since that night, I walk the halls of the hospice, and I don't feel heavy anymore. I never used to hug the grieving families, but now I do. When that teen girl's father died, I held her close as she wept in my arms, and she kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Had she woken up? Had she seen the fight? Or was she thanking me for something else? And in truth, I could barely remember what I'd done. Fifth story. I survived a Wendigo. This isn't the first story. The first one will be posted after this. My apologies. I've been hidden for a while now. You know that feeling of your home being the safest place on earth, as if it was an impenetrable fortress? It's a foreign feeling. Well, as it turns out, it only resides when you feel as if there is a trust between you and nature. And when you have broken that wall with an entity, you've lost the feeling. The happiest feeling of them all, safety. My home was a sanctuary at one point. You could confide in it for days, if you wished. The feeling of comfort would draw people in like a compass towards the north. But it's gone now. It's foreign, as I said. You take it for granted, and when it's gone, it's utterly crippling. You have to hide, you have to run, just to try to find solace in a place that has none. It's in my house. The feeling is gone, and it's in my house. I've been hiding in my cleaning closet for around 2 hours, pretty sure, and I don't know how long else this will last as the Wendigo is out for my blood, in my own house. I'll elaborate, but I don't have much time. Last week it started with the taunting. The hello S and the J-ack S still bumbling around in my mind as I type. The beast taunted me. Its bravado-packed lungs wanted to tease me and get me to move from sanctuary to catch a kill, and that doesn't make me scared. It just pisses me off. It started with the taunting while I was camping, and when I got fed up, I yelled back at it, and many reverb voices came and yelled right back at me, including my dead elderly neighbor, its early prey. Then it followed me. I screamed at it, I shot at it, and I ran home, as it was the safest place for me. And I wasted all the ammo on the damn kill. I sat there, for whatever feels like forever ago now, in front of my door, blocking it. But the creature is smart, found a way onto my leveraged patio, and glazed in my window. Then came the tapping. The slow, consistent tink-tink-tink on the glass. It was soft, and the monster crouched down to not peer in the window. But the tapping, it was worse. It grew, slowly rising from the soft tink-tink-tink to thuds against the glass, slowly cracking the canvas from the middle out until I heard it. Hello. The glass crumbled. It crawled in within the next second, the shards distinctly crunching under the weight of the thing. By this point I had my back turned, behind a door, so I had no visuals. The only thing guiding me to that thing was the soft smushing of the carpet under its feet, leading directly to the closet I was in. I leaned against the thin door as if it were a shield against a cascade of arrows, clinging my last hope tightly. It made it to the door. I heard it take a deep, long breath in, then out. It leaned in close and sniffed. Repeat a couple more times, and he was on his way. He went over to my room door, which was across the hall. I heard the inhale, a stuttering one this time, since he was sniffing. He took a pause. It felt like he debated for a moment. I opened the closet door a tiny crack to instigate what he had stopped for. He had his head tilted, then took a step back and rammed the door with his antlers. I jumped at the noise alone as he hit the door fairly hard. I looked back to see him rearing himself up to go at it again, and I focused on his antlers. They still looked splintered, as if he took on a tornado and landed headfirst onto his antlers from 100 feet up in the air. It looked as if when he took another ramming to the door, the antlers would crumble on impact, and so when he bowed his head and took a lunge forward and broke through the door, I was surprised. The door had a hole in it now. He had wriggled out of it a second earlier. The door had a hole, and to accompany it, the door bent inwards towards the hall, near the left upper corner, so much that the pole bit holding the hinge parts together, and broke it to the extent that there was an inch of room between the two halves. He wrung 3 of his fingers into the gap of the door hinge, and another 4 into the hole. He bent forward and pulled swift and fast, tearing the door from its hinges and breaking the overlapping frame with it. Preceding this, the beast stuck his head in, towards an angle so his antlers didn't get caught in the hole where the door used to be. I was scared he found a scent trail of my stuff, since he could then find me based off my scent. He went inside the room, and around 30 seconds of him sniffing around, he started rummaging. I thought I heard a low, raspy, "See you here. Yo, you are here." As if he was talking to himself, muttering. I slowly shut the crack of the door I was behind, and as soon as I had fully done so, I heard it. There were 2 thuds, then a smash and crumble of the glass. I looked out of the reimbursed crack I made. He escaped. He smashed my window and escaped. Not only was I scared, now I was scared and pissed off, because now I have this damn thing taunting me like I'm its prey, in which I will not be. I'm going to leave this segment off here. I need to pack. I need to prepare for the inevitable, and I'm going to kill that damn beast. 6th story. My first encounter with ghosts. When I was a kid, I moved to a new house. When I moved in the house, I immediately knew it's something weird in the house. Sometime my house happened something I couldn't explain. Like sometime when I was trying to turn on the light. If I was inside the room, the light usually didn't work. But every time if I left the room to turn on the light in the hallway, it immediately could work again. Or sometime the door of my room slapped so hard to close by itself. And it happened a lot. It scared me and my parents, and the weird part is, it only happened to my room. I was trying to convince myself it was just the wind, but it never seems a wind could be this strong inside the house, and it always happens immediately. I mean just a second boom, and the wind disappeared and it happened more and more frequently. One day my parents had to leave for some reason, and I was the only person to stay in the house. I stayed in my room, and I got bored, so I started looking around my room. Then I found the Bible, and it was hidden inside the drawer. Maybe it belongs to the last person who was living here. I got interested, so I decided to read it. And when I was reading in my room, suddenly the lights shoot down, but it also happened before. At that moment, I thought it was the power outage. But since I was a kid at that time, I didn't know how to fix it. So I decided to keep reading the Bible by using the flashlight to wait until my parents came home. Because I was really interested in the Bible. So I really focused. Suddenly I heard a sound. I said it's a sound, but I think it didn't come through my ears but came straight to my brain. At first it was very low, but it started getting louder and louder. It was so loud that I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't tell what kind of noise it was, but then I finally realized it was a laugh. A very high-pitched laugh, since I was the only person in the house then where the sound came from. The more I thought about it, the creepier I felt. So I decided to leave the room by acting calmly. Whatever the voice came from, I didn't want to let it notice. I was intensely shivering. I walked to the living room, sat on the sofa, and turned on the TV. I wanted to distract my attention by watching TV. But I was wondering what is the situation in my room now. So I took a glance to my room, and I saw it. There is a guy standing on the bed looking at me. When I said it's the guy, it's not very accurate. More precisely, it's a man-shaped shadow standing there and watching me. I was so scared that I didn't dare to move. My body is stiff. I couldn't take my eyes off him. So we just stared at each other for a long time. And then it jumped down the bed and disappeared in the dark. And when I finally could move, I saw the time, and it was just in the middle of the day. Usually my neighbor's kids like to play outside the house. But they didn't play on that day. When my parents came home, I told all the details about what happened today. But they insisted that it was all my imagination. Later, I learned that the demons showed up and interfered with the belief of the Christians. I couldn't help but to think that maybe on that day what I saw was not the ghost, rather the demon wanted to disturb me. 7th story. Wendigo. My best friend is a Wendigo. Madison and I were lounging in the grass of the backyard enjoying the last of the late autumn sun. She was busy playing with her toys, throwing them about as if she were sprinkling snowflakes. I, on the hand, was comfortable in my mom's lounge chair, trying to finish this book I kept putting off. It's Wendigo, not Wendigo. A dingo is a dog in Australia. I didn't take my eyes off the page. Jason ran for the knife but tripped over his own feet, falling desperately onto the sand. But he is one. Madison's whiny 7-year-old voice drew my gaze. She was a pretty child with chestnut hair. Big cheeks and even bigger eyes made her popular amongst her peers and their mothers. I don't know where she got those genes from. I was her big sister, and I was never so cute. There was always something awkward about my face. Maybe it was the thin nose or the puckered eyes. I kept to myself mostly, choosing to live in fiction rather than reality. Where did you hear that word? I asked, scanning the page one more time. Jason's taut muscles pushed against the creature, locked in a struggle he may never escape from. Madison shrugged. I think you said it one time. About a book you were reading. I laughed. Oh yeah, that terrible fake Native American romance book. God, what was it called? I recounted the piles of books that littered my room. The Wendigo's Yearning, I said finally. What a trashy book. What is a Wendigo? Madison rose from the ground, brushing off her dress. She came over to me and put her little hand on my arm. I quickly finished my paragraph before setting the book down. It was all over. Jason would never breathe in the summer air again. Well, a Wendigo is a bad spirit. Like a monster. It wants to eat people. Madison frowned. So it's not nice? I raised my eyebrows. No, Madison. It is not nice. It looks like a skeleton almost, really thin and always hungry. It eats humans because it wants to be full. But it can never be full. So it just keeps eating and eating. Madison took her hand off my arm and tapped it against her head. Does it like to play? You're being weird. I picked my book up again. The creature descended upon Jason's hard body, ripping the flesh away like newspaper. Well, I think you're wrong. Wendigos don't eat people. He didn't eat me. Jason's blood tasted sweet as the creature licked clean his insides. I rolled my eyes. You don't know a Wendigo. And your best friend is a little boy, not a monster. He used to be a little boy, she replied, turning away from me and walking towards the woods that lay beyond our yard. Madison, come back. The creature slurped down Jason's intestines. She didn't listen to me. I sighed. I'll tell Mom you went in the woods. As the creature gnawed on the final bone, it began to grow taller. Madison ignored me. When she reached the tree line, I groaned and got up. The creature would only become bigger as it ate. Madison, you're going to be in big trouble. I bet Mom will make you go to bed without dinner. She turned around, now shouldered by trees. I want you to meet him. Then you'll see. She held her hand out to side and grabbed a hold of the nearest tree branch. I was going to respond when I realized that the branch was also holding on to her. As I neared them, it was clear that this was no tree at all. It was a tall creature, extremely thin and bony, matching the color of the foliage. Its face was turned down, but I could see saliva-dripping teeth. Madison just smiled. This is my Wendigo. I knew I should have ran to her, but instead I tore back towards the house. I could hear large steps behind me, but I didn't stop. I opened and slammed the door, locking it. My breath was heavy. I looked out the window and saw Madison still holding its hand as they moved closer and closer. My mom entered the room. What are you doing? She asked sweetly. It's Madison. She is with I don't know, a monster. My mom peered out the window. She smiled and winked at me. That's just her Wendigo. Don't worry, honey, he's harmless. She turned to go back to whatever she was doing, and I gasped in horror. The entire backside of her torso had been hollowed out, licked clean. Yet she still walked away, leaving a small mucus trail as it dripped from her exposed flesh. Madison was now knocking on the door, giggling. Let us in, sis. My Wendigo is hungry. 8th story. My encounter with the Goat Man. During 1999, I worked briefly as a vacuum cleaner salesman. Yes, the job was as terrible as it sounds, which required very late nights as I was often at customers' homes till around 9 p.m. before having to go back to the head office to check out, then drive back home, often not arriving home until 12 to 1 a.m. I was working late this one particular night and was on the home stretch, around 10 minutes from home, when my old crappy cheap Ford Fiesta started to overheat. I knew the car wouldn't make it home and had no choice other than to pull into a lay-by on top of the big, dark, deserted mountain next to my town. My hometown is literally the last town before there are just mountain and forest for countless miles. As I pulled into the mountain parking area with steam pouring my engine, this is 100% true by the way, a white humanoid figure, obviously surprised that a car was pulling into a deserted parking space in the middle of the night, ran directly front of my headlights as it sprinted from the edge of the clear side of the parking area and into the forest on the other side. It had no clothes, features, genitals, and hair, etc. Just a white figure with 2 arms and 2 legs that appeared almost luminous and reflective in my lights. To say I shit myself is a bit of an understatement. My eyes popped out of my sockets when it ran in front of me. But then I realized that I was stuck in a dead car in a deserted mountain lay-by in the middle of the night with no mobile phone signal, as this was back in the days when mobile phones were just starting to become popular. But large chunks of the country were missing from network coverage. I had no choice but to sit there for around an hour until my car cooled down, as it gave up the ghost pretty much the second I pulled in. So I sat in my car, alone, staring directly into the forest where the thing I saw had run. No weapon, no way to contact, any way to let them know where I was, and no passing traffic to possibly flag down. During my wait in the car, I obviously started to wonder what I had seen. I knew for a fact that I had actually seen something, and it was not a trick of the light. That much was clear. I discounted sheep, horses, foxes, or any other animal that populated the Welsh mountains, as I was certain it a 2-legged humanoid creature shape with roughly human head, body, arms, and legs proportions. The obvious answer would have been that it was some very strange man who for some reason was wearing a white entire body stocking. Think Charlie's Greenman and It's Always Sunny. But since we were miles away from the nearest home, and I was the only car around, it's highly unlikely that someone would have spent hours walking through thick forest just to hang out at a parking area in the middle of a forest wearing a unitard. Since I could rule out possible animals or humans, I had to consider the alternative, which isn't a nice thing to think about when you were stuck in a broken-down car with this creature very possibly still outside. I didn't think it was aliens as it was too tall compared to the classic look, while any type of apparition or ghost doesn't tend to run away from people when surprised. I'm not sure if there is some kind of Welsh version of a Wendigo, but if I had to categorize the encounter, this would be my number one choice. There was always talk of satanic rituals and witches practicing in the forest when I was a kid, and also of illegal bare-knuckle fights where people had been killed and buried there to cover up the crime. But I didn't think much of it at the time and always wrote it off to superstition and rumor. But now I'm not so sure. Eventually my car cooled down enough for me to limp back home. No one really believed me when I told them what I saw and are adamant that it was a sheep. But to this day, I will swear that the creature I encountered was something different. I've been in the forest many times since camping, biking, and hiking, and have never seen anything like that again. But whenever I go there, I am always aware of the possible presence of the goat man. Ninth story. Very up-close skinwalker encounter. I don't really know how to start this. I was watching a YouTube video and made me think I should probably post my experience. This happened my sophomore or junior year of high school, so almost 3 years ago. I live in rural western North Carolina and I'm the first stop for the bus route, but my bus stop is probably a quarter mile away from my house, as our neighborhood is on a hill with a big private drive that leads up to the houses, and every morning say around 6:50, I would walk out of my driveway and down to the bus stop and wait. It's pitch black down there, by the way, only my phone flashlight to guide me. And every day I would stand and wait, most of the time listening to music or just looking at my phone. It always felt eerie being in the dark alone like that, but I just have always felt uncomfortable in the dark. But one morning I was walking down the hill as I did. It's a steep, long hill, by the way, and I only made it about a quarter of the way down and I heard a scraping noise almost. It's hard to describe the best way. I know how explain it as nails on sheet metal. Originally, I didn't think much of it and just slowed down a little. And then it happened again. All of this happens within 30 seconds, mind you. And by my instinct, I guess I just stopped in my tracks. My heart started pounding from the noise, making nervous, and I began to hear loud rustling at the tree line on my left side before something pale white, human-shaped, and maybe deer-sized ran out of the wood line into the small yard next to me. I turned and ran so fast I didn't get to look long as it triggered my fight or flight response. I ran all the way back up the hill and jumped over every step on my porch and straight into my house, truly fearing for my life and hyperventilating. Mind you, I'm a large guy, about 5 feet 11 inches, 250 pounds. I don't get spooked easy, but I remember running and letting out a reflexive wail of fear. It's all I could do as I ran, and to this day, I never walk in my neighborhood in the dark. I was scared so bad I found another way to get to school besides the bus, and shortly after got my license. I just want to hear what y'all think. I've only told my mom and my friends, and I'm more than willing to post pictures of where it happened as I still live here. 10th story. I can see people's auras, and it's a curse. Yes, I can see people's auras. And I hate saying it so bluntly. It makes me sound like some hack psychic who fakes the ability as a means of exploitation and a paycheck. I've never made money from my ability. I've never taken advantage of it. And, until now, I've never spoken of it to anybody. But I really do see them, and I'm starting to view it as more of a curse. I have a reason for typing this out, and I assure you, there isn't a happy ending. For me, it's quite simple. I see a faint light surrounding people, everyone, and in that light, I can see their morality. The brighter and more translucent the light is, the better the person. The darker and opaquer, the worse. Dim and partly translucent are morally ambiguous. To simplify things, those are the three ways I describe them. Dark equals evil. Bright equals good. Dim equals somewhere in between. It's strange. I've always viewed the people with gray/dim auras as arbiters, mediators, the people in between, who aren't one or the other, and will always have difficult decisions to make. I was a child when I first became aware of my gift. It didn't take long to figure out that the brighter auras were kinder to me and selfless. While both of my parents are good people, my father's aura was quite a bit brighter than my mother's. As a result, he was always far more patient and understanding with me. It was clear to see that my teachers and fellow students with brighter auras were usually friendlier and more compassionate. The dark auras were the stereotypical fighters, lunch money stealers, and bullies. I would say I was around 8 years old when I fully figured out that I have a gift that most people don't have, that possibly nobody else has. I've read some of the New Age websites and alternative medicine articles that give their take on aura reading. While I believe that the vast majority of it is bullshit, I expect there must be at least some other people out there with my ability. So I don't want to completely dismiss those people as an outright hoax. It's just that for me, it doesn't work anything like the way those websites describe. I visited numerous aura readers and psychics. Most of them have dim or dark auras themselves, and I'm certain they don't really hold this power. I'm not saying all psychics are terrible people. I visited a few who had very bright auras. They were unable to convince me that they really have psychic powers, but they at the very least use their deception to try and help people. You need to understand. I'm going to end this entry by sharing a terrifying event that is happening to me. But before I get to that, I think there are a few more things I need to explain. I imagine many of you are curious as to what type of aura is the most common. I'm happy to tell you that the majority of people are somewhere between dim and bright. I see very few dark auras. This isn't scientific, and I haven't traveled the world plotting out charts and graphs, but I'd estimate around 60% of people are brightish, around 25% dimish, leaving just around 15% darkish. Again, these are just estimates. What's the precise difference between, say, bright and dim? I have no idea, but rest assured, there is far more bright in the world than dark. The next thing I'd like to discuss is children. I can see a person's aura right from birth, and I've never encountered an aura changing as someone ages. I'm not sure what this means for the whole nature versus nurture debate. And I'm not saying that everyone with a dark aura always behaves terribly, or vice versa. A person with a bright aura might be born in horrible conditions, acquire a drug problem, and then resort to thievery to feed their addiction. I think the difference is this. A bright aura thief with a horrible upbringing may rob someone, but they would never intentionally hurt someone in the process. A dark aura thief would kill someone if they could get away with it without even a second thought. Another interesting note. I find the ratio between bright/dim/dark to be similar across pretty much all human activities. Whether I'm at a church or a death metal concert, it always seems to be around that same 60%-25%-15% ratio. I once visited a federal prison and was shocked to see that at least half of the prisoners had bright auras. I had to be at the prison in person to see this because I can't see auras on photographs, television shows, movies, or even in mirrors. I can only see auras in the real world. Another strange thing. I can't even see my own aura. I assume and hope I would be on the brighter spectrum, but I can't see it. The brightest person I ever saw worked as a social worker. She shone so bright that it was difficult for me to even look at her. Based on the way people acted in her presence, I think that almost everyone around her could sense her brightness in a subconscious way. Everyone loved her. She had donated a kidney to someone she barely even knew. She had a special needs adopted child. Most of the money she earned was donated to various charities. And that's only the little that I knew of her. This woman shined so brightly that she scared me. It was scary that someone could be so good. But it wasn't nearly as scary as the darkest person I ever saw. I was 20 years old at the time, leaving a club downtown at 2 a.m. A man quietly walked down the street. I didn't see him at first, but I noticed the light dimming around me. This man was so dark that he partly absorbed the light around him. I looked at him long and hard. He looked desperate, cruel, and callous. When he looked up and locked eyes with me, it made me fall back. He smirked, as though he knew what I could see. I saw his face up close. I would never forget it. And I recognized it when I saw his mugshot a few weeks later in the newspaper. He had murdered his ex-wife and 2 children in cold blood. I think I need to get to it now. The reason why I'm writing this out. I fell in love a year ago. She didn't shine anywhere near as bright as what I've seen before, but she most assuredly wasn't dark or even dim. She was beautiful. Her sense of humor, her wit, her everything. She was my dream woman. And I've never told her anything at all about the auras I see. I could go into far more about her, but this isn't a love story. What's important is this. We fell in love. She got pregnant. We got married. We were happy. We were so happy. I remember hearing the buzz of my phone 2 mornings ago. I remember my excitement when I saw it's happening. Come to the hospital. I remember my frustration when I got stuck in traffic. I remember how long it took to find a parking spot. I remember shouting at a nurse, "What room is my Wi-Fi in?" I remember bursting through a door and seeing the smile on my wife's face. I remember seeing the doctor, his light shining so bright, as he told me, "Congratulations, it's a boy." The doctor held him up to me, and all the light in the room dissipated. "No, this can't be." I remember saying. The doctor put him in my arms. The darkness around my son was so absolute that I could barely even see him. He was a void. He was so dark that the world barely even existed around him. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. I started weeping. I think my wife and the doctor thought they were tears of joy. But they weren't. Lord knows they weren't. I think back to the dark outline around that man that murdered his family. It was up to that point the darkest I'd ever seen. But the darkness around my son was 100 times worse. 1,000 times worse. And what could possibly be 1,000 times worse than murdering your entire family? It's been 2 days. We're home now. My son's darkness is so extreme that it dims the hallway leading to his room. My wife knows something is wrong. I think she suspects I'm having regrets about having children at all. If only she knew. What do? He's my son. Just 20 minutes ago, I stood above him, holding a pillow over his face. But I couldn't do it. Not yet anyway. A man who could murder his 2-day-old baby boy. What color would his aura be? And here's the thought that keeps going through my mind as I sit here alone. The fathers of our worst. The Adolf Hitlers. Joseph Stalins. Timothy McVeighs. If their fathers knew what they would become, would they murder them in the cradle? Would they have the strength to hold down the pillow as long as it takes? I can see the door of my son's room from my office. The hallway seems to be growing darker. I look down at my hands as I type this. Maybe I'm going crazy, but there seems to be an aura around my hands and arms now. It's gray. It's dim. Maybe it's always been dim. I'm looking down at the pillow beside me. The grayish dim outline around my hands more apparent than ever. Maybe it's time. Maybe this is why I have this gift. It all comes down to right now. Maybe it's time. I think it's time. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of Horror in Detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. There's something hunting U.S. Marines in the desert of California. I want to remain anonymous due to the nature of the story. See, I was in the Marine Corps. No, I wasn't in any special forces or anything unique per se. I was just a regular rank-and-file Marine. I was stationed at 29 Palms Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Training Center, CACT for short. I wasn't the only one who has seen or experienced things in the training grounds and surrounding areas. I was told to keep my mouth shut, but I'm gonna die soon anyway, so even if they do come for me, it isn't going to make a difference. It was during early April, so the weather wasn't too bad. It wasn't hot during the day, and it wasn't cold at night. I always enjoyed doing field ops during that time of the year. I got away from the dumb shit that we had to do day in and day out back on main side, and I was typically left to my own devices while out in the field. So late one night, me and a buddy of mine are doing fire watch for our section of the rest area. We had our rifles, plate carriers, helmets with our NVGs, night vision goggles, mounted on the front, and rifles with us. We also had 4 mags apiece of live ammo. That night an artillery battalion was doing night practice, so you'd hear the echo of the guns followed by the sound of the shells hitting the ground and exploding. It just sounded like far-off thunder. Me and my friend were talking about just random crap when I flipped down my NVGs and saw movement out in the distance. At first, I thought it was just the green tint of the goggles fucking with my head, but then I saw it again. I tapped my buddy and asked if he was seeing this. He flipped down his NVGs too, and he nodded. Yeah, but what is it? Coyote? He asked. No. Too big to be a coyote. Besides, it looks like it's running around on 2 legs. I said back to him. That's when he tapped me and pointed out into the dark. There's more than one, bro. He said. I looked to where he was pointing, and that's when I saw 4 or 5 other figures darting around in the dark. These things weren't that big. I'd say maybe about 5 feet 5 inches give or take. They also appeared to be very strong and built with massive arm and leg muscles. They were dark and their skin looked leathery. They had big dark eyes and no nose to speak of. Their mouth was wide and filled with razor-sharp teeth. They walked around hunched over with their arms dangling by their sides. Their arms themselves were massive. They ran at insane speeds, occasionally running on all 4. They had 4 fingers on each hand, and the claws were long and sharp. It was like they had daggers on there for nails. Dude, I think they're getting closer. I nodded. Yeah. I'm gonna go get the corporal up. He nodded, and I raced over to where our corporal was sleeping and shook him awake. Hey man, there's something out there. You need to come take a look. He cursed under his breath and sat up. This better be good, he said as he sat up. That's when we heard gunfire. I raced back to my buddy who was frantically shooting into the dark. I looked and I saw these creatures out in the dark, maybe 400 to 300 yards away. As other Marines had woken up to the sound of my buddy shooting, the OIC officer in charge came running up asking what the fuck was going on. When we pointed to the creatures, he froze in place. About this time, we heard tons of gunfire suddenly erupt from another unit who was conducting training as well. When I looked back at where these things were, they were no longer there. Instead, they were running on all 4s directly at us. I raised my rifle and began to fire at them as those with guns and ammo joined in, and the others who didn't ran back to get theirs. I lined up my sights with the closest one and began to fire into it. I saw chunks of its flesh get ripped off when I hit it, and it tumbled down, but without missing a beat it regained its balance and kept sprinting at us. At that point, I knew our rifles were useless, but I wasn't going to leave my buddy. That's when I heard the OIC yelling for us to get back in the trucks and get the fuck out of there and get back to main side. Me and my friend turned and booked it for our 7-ton. I flipped on the battery switch and my buddy cranked the truck on. As we began to start moving, I looked out the window in time to see these things reach the camp. A Marine who hadn't realized what was going on until it was too late was impaled by one of the creature's claws and fell to the ground. I watched as he tried to crawl away, but the thing leaned over a bit his upper torso and head completely off with a single bite. As we began to turn out of there, I saw a Humvee that had 3 of these things on racing towards it. The guy in the turret tried to flip the .50 cal around to unload into the creatures, but he wasn't fast enough, and one of them ripped him out of the turret and flung him to one of the others. He didn't have time to move before the thing sank its claws into his chest and began to eat him. I watched as the thing on top of the Humvee then jumped down onto the hood and shattered the bullet-resistant front glass and pull out the mangled corpse of the driver and run off into the desert with him. The remaining 3 Marines got out and made a run for our truck. I tapped my buddy to let them get on. They never made it. One by one the things picked them off and ran off with them, their screams fading off into the desert. By the time we got back onto the main road back to Mainside and caught up with the rest of our unit, we noticed how active the night sky had become. There were helicopters everywhere with searchlights. We figured someone had called it in, and they were trying to find the creatures or the missing Marines. Well, what was left of them anyways? When we were next up at the checkpoint, I noticed something off about the guys manning it. They wore all black, with black ski masks over their face and their MGs down. They didn't have any patches, name tapes, or no identification with them. They were armed to the teeth though. One of their vehicles had a minigun mounted on it. They all carried high-powered rifles with high-tech sights, laser sights, and other attachments on their rifles. When it was our turn, they had us step out of the truck and tell them what we saw. After we explained everything, the guy in charge looked at my friend and listed off his full name, date of birth, social security number, where his mom and dad were, the name of his dog that he had when he was in middle school. He then looked at me and did the same thing. Once he was done, he looked at both of us. If you mutter a word of what actually happened here tonight, you and your families will disappear for good. Do you understand? We both nodded with our jaws on the floor. The guy had mentioned things that I had never told anyone about. They then told us that if anyone asks, a group of Marines went off to go get something and wound up getting lost. With that, they sent us on back to the main side of the base. I got out about a year after that, but I never went on another field op again. To this day, I still relive that night when I go to bed each night. I just hope that whoever they were, they killed those things so no more Marines have to go out like that. In short, if you're ever stationed in 29 Palms, CA, and you go on a field op, keep an eye out in the dark and be sure you aren't too far away from a vehicle and pray those things don't decide to turn you into a meal. Second story. My neighbor Wendigo. You never really believe in something until you see it, and when you do, you'd wish that you hadn't. Sometimes not knowing is better. The things this world holds, the monsters that hide in the dark. I am forever haunted. I never had a problem being in the woods. I pretty much lived in them as a child. Climbing trees and swimming in random creeks were what I thrived on. Catching tadpoles, frogs, snakes, and any wildlife possible, I loved it. My fiancé and I moved to a tiny mountain town in North Carolina with his parents. They lived at almost the very top of mountain. If it snowed and you don't plow the driveway, it will ice and you will be stuck. For the most part, things were normal, well, as normal as they can be with a witch for a boyfriend. Ghosts and the random demon or dark entity were pretty common in our house, still are. So as I'm standing outside on the porch smoking a cigarette, I'm not too alarmed to feel a weird presence. As it stands, the backyard sits right on the edge of forest. So we spent much of our free time tracking animals and carcasses and ingredients. We both enjoyed the nature and recharge being there. Late at night, you have to stay vigilant for the various mountain critters that will attack. Cougars, bears, and coyotes the main threat. I stood on the porch, glancing around in the trees, keeping my eyes peeled for the first sign of danger. First, I hear the whispers like someone trying to get my attention. For the most part, won't ignore it. Then I hear a tree branch rustle. I rationalize, okay, at about 10 feet off the ground, it's either a bird, raccoon, or the like. How very wrong I was. The longer I stare, the more obvious the shape becomes. I can see these giant antlers at least 10 points. And face, oh God, that face. An elongated snout like a deer, only rotted to the bone with these patches of still rotting flesh. Empty sockets for eyes that stared into your soul and chilled you to the bone. Nothing good seen with those eyes. The head sat on an also still rotting torso, with broken ribs jutting out in every direction, giving the thought to a stabbing victim. Its organs that looked ready to spill out. And the stench, that unbearable stench of death and madness. I was stuck, frozen with terror. I shook and only watched this thing as it watched me. It only took me seconds to realize that the whispering was this thing trying to speak to me, coerce me to come to it. It asked me to walk towards it, let it devour me. It walked towards me on shaky, weak-looking deer legs, all 4 feet moving careful and without sound. Before I was able to blink, it has an arm stretched out. In front of me, long, jagged claws for tearing flesh. Sinewy muscles contracting under rotten meat. It is 20 feet away from me, but it seems like those fingers are centimeters away from me. I can feel the wind move. It brushed my cheek. This startled me into backing up into the door, only to have the porch light cut off and the door locked. All I can do is scream. I call for my fiancé, but I can hear him laughing behind the door, not knowing what was going on, trying to scare me. I tell him there's something out here trying to get me, the fear genuine. He swings open the door to yank me behind him while he looks around. There's nothing there. The thing vanished. He asked me what I saw, and all I could muster was Wendigo. I thought he'd given himself whiplash with how fast he spun around. He knows the word and the creature well. Native American folklore advises that you stay away from them, never speak to them, and most important, never turn your back. I've only recently told him the details of what I saw. The thing that haunts my nightmares and made me so afraid of the dark I can't be alone. I have never felt terror so heart-wrenching and chilling before. I felt a piece of me died and sucked into that monster's endless abyss for eyes. I never want to see that awful face again. I only thought that here was an appropriate place to share my story. Third story. My first and only hunting trip with my grandfather. My grandfather died a few months ago, and I felt that, in order to properly honor his memory, I needed to share this tale. I have a lot of stories about him, but I felt this was the one that was most important. He made me the man I am today. When I was growing up, I would spend summers at my grandparents' home in northern Washington. Their home was surrounded by a forest with nothing but a small dirt trail leading in and out. They lived around 5 hours outside any town, so we mostly had fish, game, and whatever they were growing that season. The majority of the time I spent there was spent fishing, gardening, or listening to my grandfather's tales from when he was a young man in Ireland. On my 14th birthday, he took me hunting for the first time. I gathered our bags and hunting bows and met him out front. He took his gear and handed me a small sprig from the blackthorn tree out back. Back in Ireland, he would keep them on him as a way to ward away evil spirits and take some with him every time he leaves the house. I figured it was just something he did as a sort of good luck charm, like a rabbit's foot. I tucked it into my back pocket and we set out on his normal hunting trail. It was nearly night before we set up camp. He was an old-fashioned camper, no tent or sleeping bag for him. He would only ever bring a blanket, pillow, and a fire steel. Once everything was set up, not that it took very long, he started telling another story from Ireland. A few hours and a meal of jerky and bread later, we went asleep. I woke up a few hours before sunrise. The forest was never particularly loud, especially compared to our home in Seattle, but that night it was as if someone had muted everything. The fire had burned down to ash, and the night was lit by nothing but a small crescent moon, just enough to see it by. A dark figure stood just beyond the tree line, staring into the camp at me. I had never felt as terrified as I was that night. I had no idea what it was. It looked too tall for a human, and it made no sound as it started towards me, inching its way through the brush. I was frozen, too scared to move or even blink. I could just barely see the moon's glint in its eyes as it crossed the boundary into our makeshift camp. They were deep and dark, a terrible hunger in them. The closer it got to me, the more of it I could make out. Its body was tall, but emaciated. Arms too long for its body, pulled close to its chest, tipped with several inch-long claws. It swayed and stumbled as it walked, never quite getting close enough to fall. It stopped a few feet from me, the hideous globes of its eyes never moving from mine. Just as it raised its arms and lunged for me, the sharp sound of an arrow zipping by broke the silence. It pierced into the beast's throat, covering the ground and its onyx flesh with blood. Its horrible scream rang through the night, breaking the hold my fear held on me, and I scrambled away from it. I hit something warm and solid behind me, but before I could even register that I'd stopped, a familiar hand on my shoulder threw me to the side, and my grandfather rushed the beast, a bright white blade in his hand. The beast burned as his blade cut into it, the smell of burning flesh adding to the metal scent in the air. All in all, it had only lasted a minute or so between when I first saw it and when it lay on the ground, an unmoving mass of flesh and mottled, black fur. My grandfather said it would be too dangerous to leave before then, but even more so to stay another night. We packed our bags up again, ate a small meal, and waited for daybreak. We headed back as soon as the sun came up. Before we left, I noticed something odd. My grandfather's sprig of blackthorn was tied around the arrow in the beast's throat. That was the last time we visited them for years. Fourth story. The Wendigo. I'm writing this from a small motel just outside Green Bay. Something has been stalking, or more accurately hunting me. I don't know what to do, and that's why I'm asking you to help. You all know the legend of the Wendigo, right? Maybe you know it by Wendigo. Algonquian legends describe this entity as a man-devouring beast native to the Atlantic coast and Great Lakes region, as well as parts of Canada. I think this is what's stalking me. It started happening when I moved into my summer cabin past Green Bay. Little things happened at first. My dogs would bark into the woods, but I would see nothing. I didn't think much of it, just that it could be a deer or mountain lion. That didn't worry me because I'm a native U.P. of Michigan native and have had previous hunting experience. Mostly this would happen and my dogs would growl into the woods but then seemingly forget about to go romp around the cabin. Then came the night. As I lay in bed one night, I heard shuffling outside my window. My curtains were closed, but the window itself was open. My breathing hitched as I saw a shadow standing outside my window. Just know that the cabin doesn't have a high ceiling, so the windows are low, so I'm not sure the exact size of this creature. I lay frozen as bed as the shadow stayed there for what seemed like centuries but could only have been a few minutes. Soon, the creature the shadow belonged to shuffled away, but not without emitting a guttural growl. This happened every night for the next 3 days. It would appear, stay, and then leave. After the third night of this, I woke up and went to check on my 2 hounds, Eleanor and Chip. I walked around to the back of the cabin where they slept curled up in their makeshift dog houses. I froze and felt my stomach rise up to my throat when I reached their spot. Blood was spattered everywhere, and body parts lay strewn all over the yard. Eleanor's figure lay disfigured and torn apart next to Chip's quivering body. He, thankfully, was unharmed, but shocked and in quite a mental state. What monster would do this? I thought despairingly. No bear or mountain lion would dismember a dog like this. I knew what had done this. The creature that stood outside my window every night. The strangest thing, however, wasn't the spattered blood and gore, but the pearly white flap of skin next to my dog's corpse. Good old girl didn't go down without a fight. I picked it up and turned it around in my hands. One side was an almost translucent pearly skin, and on the other a light bluish blood, I think. I dropped it immediately and ran back inside. I grabbed my old hunting rifle and my pack, which contained some food, water, and other camping necessities. The nearest highway was due north, but 38 miles, but I wanted out of these woods before nightfall. That's when it comes. During night. In the daytime it stays in the woods, always watching, always following. I let Chip loose and we set due east, where I knew a small town was less than 25 miles away. I could make it, but I would have to haul ass if I didn't want to die. Me and Chip walked for the first half of our journey, and then we ran. We made it to the town right before sunset. If you can even call it a town. There's a gas station, a motel, and a couple summer cabins by the lake. As we emerged from the woods, I heard the scariest sound of my life. The roar was deafening and pissed off. I knew that this wasn't the end of the game this son of a bitch was playing, but for me, tonight was enough. I am now staying at the motel, where the only residents are the owner, a runaway teen, and me. As far as I know, we could be the only people in this residence. I'm scared, so scared. I can feel it watching me. Waiting. Hunting. If I can survive another day, I will check in. But for now, I cannot fall asleep. The deadbolts on my door will not protect me, and Chip has started to growl at the door. I have survived yet another night from this beast that roams the woods of the Great Lakes. Thank you so much for your support and input. I know many of you have been wondering why I didn't drive out of there like I had the hounds of hell on my trail. One very important detail that I forgot to mention was that I had my friend dropped me off. I wanted to have a more authentic rustic experience and to get away from the city. My friend, let's call him Mark, was supposed to drive up every 2 days to check on me since he has a camp not too far away. Only, he never showed. He dropped me off, and then he vanished. I knew something must have happened to him because he was the type of guy you could rely on, and I had known him since first grade and he never flaked. Even though his cabin wasn't too far away, I decided not to risk it. I knew something must have happened to him and his wife. As soon as I get some answers from this godforsaken town, I'm going back to look for him. He would have done the same for me. I tried calling him from the phone in the office of the motel I'm staying at. No answer. Back on topic, all through the night I heard growling. At times it would sound distant, and at others close. I woke up to find long scratches on my motel door. I wonder why it didn't just tear it down and come get me. But it wants to play. I think it's because I might have woken it up. I don't know how or when, just that it's awake and coming after me. This morning, the creature left me a surprise. Eleanor's collar. It's a simple band of leather with her name inscribed on it. That fucker is going to pay. I have to get rid of it, even I don't survive. First it took my dog, and then my best friend. But no more. I woke up and walked around town for a bit. My rifle on my back and Chip by my side for protection. It turns out this town used to be larger, but when the stock market crashed, almost everybody left and never came back. Or so the motel owner tells me. He seems strange, though. He's skittish and is always looking off into the woods. The lights outside the motel are always on, and he keeps the doors to all the rooms locked. He's either hiding something or knows what's following me. I think it's both. I know this might sound stupid, but I might try to break into his office. There's something in there that can help me. I know it. Maybe I won't, though. I have the feeling that he could be a dangerous enemy. The kid that's here is most definitely a runaway. She cropped black hair, tons of black eyeliner, and lots of gothic black clothes. I wonder why she ran away? I don't think she knows anything. She said she hitched a ride here from a truck driver, and I don't think she's lying. Despite her efforts to look tough, she has a soft voice. She wasn't meant to be like this. Her name is Mason. Thank God she's safe, though. Who knows what could have happened with a truck driver? Yes, I know not all of them are pervs, but come on, you've seen the movies. She's staying in the room next to mine. I'm glad because I'll be able to keep an eye on her, but I'm also scared for her. I can't imagine if anything happened to her because of me and what I have awoken. My parental skills are kicking in even though I've never had children. Chip hasn't slept since we got here. He stayed up all night pacing and growling at the door. I didn't get any sleep last night. I have dark shadows under my eyes because I refuse to fall asleep. I'm pretty sure he can smell the decaying flesh of the beast that is hunting us and has killed Eleanor. I can't bear to watch him suffer. I know that he misses Eleanor. I do. My dogs were the only family I had left. Now, it's just Chip and me. My father died when I was a little girl. It was on a hunting trip. They say he must have been attacked by a wild animal because his body was never recovered. I'm starting to think I might be reliving his experience. Right now, Chip and my rifle are my only source of protection. I'm going to look for sources of fire later. The gas station looks new, but the lights haven't been on and I haven't seen anybody in there. There might be gas and supplies that I can use to kill this motherfucker. That is, before it gets me. I just hope I can save myself and this little girl before it's too late. I still have no idea what woke it up. Could it have been already awake? Maybe I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I prayed last night. Why God? Why me? Why would you let a creature this ferocious and demonic be born? Why let it roam the earth? What have I done to deserve this? Why God? Why? As I walked around town, I noticed none of the other buildings had scratches. Even Mason didn't hear any growling or had scratches on her doors. It's eerie. It's like I'm the only one who can see and hear this beast. Or maybe the others are just pretending. I plan on looking into this town's past. They have to have had something to do with this creature. It's impossible that they haven't. I need to rest, but I am too afraid to close my eyes. I am afraid of what will come and slit my throat in my sleep. Of what will devour me, bones and all. I am slowly being driven insane by the utter madness of this situation. I can't take it anymore. I need this to end. And I'm going to be the one to end it. I will try to check in as soon as I can or when I get new information on this hell creature. Thank you for your support. I don't know how much more of this madness I can take. I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out IT's smarter than I think, than anyone thinks or could possibly imagine. What could I possibly have done to wake this beast? I am writing to you in hopes that one day, someone will be able to kill it. I don't know if I can, if I am smart or strong enough. Last night was the worst night so far. It finally fed on human flesh. For the last 2 days, I have been trying to figure out how to kill this bastard. Fire. That's the answer. I had a plan. I had found gasoline, matches, and even an old couple sticks of dynamite. How lucky was I? Turns out back in the 1900s this town was famous for coal mining. There's even a couple of coal mines that weren't closed off. I thought I had it all figured out. So did that son of a bitch. It was nearing dusk yesterday, and I had everything laid out. It wasn't a super fancy trap or anything, but it would do the deed and kill this demon. At dusk, I was ready and waiting for it to come. I knew it would. It always does. My trap was set right in the outskirts of the woods. I wanted to keep the motel owner and the stowaway kid out of this. I found enough dynamite to make 4 small piles. I placed them in ring and connected them all with some spare cord that I found. Hopefully this would work. I sat in the middle of the circle and waited, my trusty rifle at my side. I also had multiple knives on me hidden beneath my shirt and in my boots. Soon I heard growling that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Then it stopped and all was quiet. I don't mean peaceful silence, I mean dead silence. No birds chirping or squirrels running around in the trees. It's like they knew what was coming and were trying to save themselves. Leaves start to crunch and twigs snap. The growling resumes, but it sounds like it's coming from all directions. I stood up and braced myself the best I could. Who can prepare you for the moment you must fight a beast descended from the fires of hell itself? Then, it emerged from the woods. I cannot describe how horrifying this creature was. I wanted to close my eyes and curl up in a ball until this whole thing was over with. I almost did. But then I stopped myself and decided that I wouldn't let this beast harm any other people. I wasn't trying to play hero. I was trying to save myself. This creature was entombed in decaying yellow skin. Its glowing yellow eyes stared into mine, and I felt my bones shake. The Wendigo loomed over me. Its sharp fangs were leering at me, almost laughing, as if saying, "Ha-ha, what now?" I snapped myself out of my fear-induced stupor and ran to the nearest pile of dynamite. I pulled my pack of matches out and tried to get one lit. My hands were shaking so bad that it took 3 tries. The Wendigo slowly stalked towards me on its towering legs. I dropped the match on the pile and waited for fireworks. No such luck. The match sputtered and died as it landed just to the side of the dynamite wick. My heart dropped. I was certainly doomed. I had it all planned out that I didn't expect anything to go wrong. I looked around for the patch of matches that had fallen out of my hand when the creature batted me aside with a swipe of its paw. Blackness. When I regain consciousness, I see the Wendigo peering over me. There is a long gash along my left leg, put there by its monstrous teeth. I groan and try to sit up. Soon, I find the beast on top of me snarling and spitting in my face. I find one of the hunting knives I had hidden on me and plunge it as far as it'll go before crawling away. I look at the creature and find the hilt sticking from where its stomach should be. Grayish-blue blood is oozing from the wound. The beast roars in pain. "Hey, what's going?" That sentence is cut off as the Wendigo lunges for Mason, the runaway kid. With a single swipe of his clawed hand, the creature tears into the kid's chest, chunks of flesh ripping away. The look on Mason's face will haunt me forever. It was pure fear and surprise. The poor kid never saw it coming. I scream in frustration as I try to get the nearest pile of dynamite. I reach it and frantically search the ground for a match and feel a minuscule sense of hope as I find one. I strike it against the nearest rock and toss it onto the pile. I stand up on my legs and groan as I hobble away. The force of the explosion pushes me to the ground. Despite the dull ringing in my ears, I can hear a blood-curdling shriek. I look into the flames and see the dancing figure of the hell creature. Red and orange engulf its body as it is burned. I lay down among the ferns and brush that coat the forest floor. I closed my eyes and drifted off. You must be thinking by now that I killed it, that the Wendigo is dead. When I come to, I get up and make my way to the burned patch of land. I look around for any sign of a corpse, but find none. Not even bones. I could have been naive and assumed that the ashes scattered on the ground were from the beast, but I knew better. It probably ran off back to where it came from to nurse its injuries. I know that there is a good possibility that it'll come back. Of course, I'll be long before that does happen. I have since made it back home. I am never going back to that cabin. Let it sit there and rot. A reminder of the constant sorrow that can lie in these woods among the beauty. Let it remind people of nature's dark side. I am thinking of having a memorial for Mason and Eleanor. Chip is okay. I had left him in the motel room before I embarked on the hunt. I couldn't lose him. He's the only family I have left. I am okay. I will be. At least until it comes again. This time, I will be ready. Fifth story. I used to be a park ranger in the Adirondacks. I think we're all in trouble. It was close to 3 in the afternoon when the knock came on the door to the ranger station. I was mildly surprised to hear it, given that it was early January in the foothills of the Adirondacks and the temperature was hovering at a balmy 12 degrees, with wind chills driving it into the negatives with frustrating frequency. The wind had been howling against the isolated station since before sunrise that morning, and I wondered if I was going to need to deal with any damage to my little abode after the storm blew through. I'd been monitoring the forecast and weather radar all day, and it looked like I was in for quite the blizzard by the time evening rolled around. It had been snowing most of the day already, but so far it hadn't been very heavy. I expected that to change by nightfall, however, which, in January, was only in another couple hours. I didn't usually keep the front door to the ranger station locked, since it wasn't uncommon for hikers and campers to make a pit stop on their way up the trail to the observation areas, either to log their camping site for the night or just in hopes of a nice hot cup of coffee before they continued on their hike. The door hadn't been latching correctly lately, though, and had the tendency to swing open when a strong gust caught it just right, so I'd been keeping it locked until I could repair it. The knocking was light, somehow hesitant and almost polite, if that makes any sense. It was so quiet that I almost didn't hear it over the whistling of the wind and creaking of the station. I'd been in the middle of composing an email request for a new generator, as mine had been acting up a bit lately, and had to pause my typing and listen intently to ensure I'd even heard it in the first place. When it came again, only a bit louder, I pushed back from my desk and took another sip from my steaming mug before walking over and opening the door. Outside stood 5 people, 3 men and 2 women. all dressed in what looked like expensive and very new cold weather coats and snow pants, all looking very similar except for the various bright colors and all bearing the familiar North Face logo. Their anxious faces peeked out from within their drawn and cinched hoods, and I had to suppress a grin. They looked dressed to climb Everest, not hike the lower trails of the Adirondacks. Tourists. Probably European and probably their first time seeing this sort of weather, I thought. It was a fairly common occurrence. Folks from all over the world came to visit these mountains, looking to experience all the beautiful wilderness we had to offer. I wasn't unsympathetic. If you weren't used to the unpredictable climate here in the winter, it could quickly catch you by surprise and get dangerous very quickly. "Hi there," I said cheerfully, stepping back into the doorway and motioning them inside. Coming out of the snow and warm up by the fire. The man who'd been knocking turned to his companions, said something in Spanish, and then turned back to me with a wide grin and nodded, stepping past me and into the warmth of the station. The rest followed quickly, anxious to get out of the chill wind that was blowing hard outside. As soon as they were all in, I closed the door again and locked it to make sure it didn't blow open. "Gracias, sir." "I am Martin," said the man, pulling back his hood and unzipping his quilted-down coat. He gestured to the others in turn. "This is Lucas, Diego, Sofia, and Triana." I nodded my greeting to each. Martin continued with a smile. "It is very cold. We come to visit USA from Spain, to see your beautiful mountains and enjoy the lovely scenery." His accent was very heavy, but his English was far better than my Spanish, so I didn't have much room to criticize. "But it seems a storm is coming, and we fear there will be too much snow. Unfortunately, we are not so prepared for that." I nodded, patting him on the shoulder as I moved past him and opened the door leading to the shelter room, reaching in and turning on the lights. "That's certainly true, my friend. I'm afraid we're in for a bit of a blizzard this evening. Bad time for a winter stroll through the mountains," I said. "Fortunately, we happen to have enough space for you and your friends to make yourself at home and wait out the storm. My name is Jackson Turner, Ranger. There's coffee over there on the table and bunks and a comfortable sitting area in here." When the group just stared at me blankly for a moment, I got the feeling I'd lost most of them somewhere along the way. Instead, I just offered the friendliest smile I had and gestured to the room. At that, they all grinned and nodded their thanks as they quickly shuffled past me, dropping their packs on various bunks and beginning to remove their cold weather gear. I made sure they all got something hot to drink and that they understood they were welcome to stay until the weather had cleared before returning to my desk. They all seemed very pleasant and grateful for my assistance, and they drifted from my thoughts as I continued my administrative work. It was another hour before the second knocking rapped at the door, this one slow and oddly arrhythmic, almost a staccato beat, somehow unsteady and not as tentative as my other guests had been. I sighed heavily and straightened, heading around the counter and back over to the door. I hadn't had any visitors to the ranger station in a week or more, and now they were pouring in like this was a Holiday Inn Express or something. I unlocked the door and pulled it open, putting on my official greeting smile once again. In the doorway, shoulders and hooded head covered in a layer of icy snow, was a man of roughly my height, about 6 foot or so. Unlike the others, he wasn't dressed in fancy, color-coordinated cold weather gear, but instead wore a mismatched combination of clothes, like he had raided the bargain bin at a second-hand expedition store. His pants were a blue quilted nylon and looked more on the expensive side, even if they didn't exactly fit him very well, but his coat was fur-lined and looked like it was made of padded wool, layered over an old fleece jacket. His boots looked newer and not too warm, something more suited to a summer hike than a winter in the mountains, I thought. "Hey there," I said as warmly as I could, waving him inside. "Come on and out of the snow." He didn't say anything, but gave the slightest hint of a nod as he walked past me. The strong scent of musky body odor followed him, and I wondered if he was one of those reclusive hermits that I'd heard rumors of, living out here all by himself in some makeshift shack. I closed the door and locked it again, turning back to the man. He'd already taken note of the bunk room to the left, where the Spaniards were getting settled, and he headed on in and sat on one of the empty bunks in the back corner of the room. He didn't remove his coat or offer any greeting to the others, and I noted with some curiosity that he didn't have any sort of pack with him, which further made me wonder if he lived nearby in some off-grid cabin. I could see that the others were smiling and making pleasantries towards him, but he just sat there, dark eyes quietly watching the activity without a single word. There was the slightest hint of a smile upon his lips, incongruous and somehow unnerving. It only took them a few moments to abandon their attempts at including him in conversation and turn back to their own group, speaking quietly in Spanish amongst themselves. For a moment, I wondered if he might be in some sort of shock. The temperature was dropping pretty quickly outside, and it had already been too cold for some of the clothing he wore. I considered giving him a quick once-over to make sure he didn't have any frostbite or signs of hypothermia, but something about him told me he might not be so welcoming to my attention. I stood there in the doorway to the bunk room for a minute, looking over the scene. Something about the newcomer seemed off somehow. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but the way he moved, his lack of communication, the way he was just sitting there perfectly still on the corner bunk, just seemed strange. There was something else too. Something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something that tickled the back of my consciousness, just out of reach, more an instinctive unease than coherent thought. I found myself hoping the man would spend a few minutes warming himself and then be on his way again. Turning my attention to the others, I realized that they must have found something odd with him as well, as they had all subconsciously clustered around the end of the table farthest from him and were speaking more quietly than before, more subdued. I noticed them periodically casting quick, uncomfortable glances in his direction, but never for more than the briefest of moments, as if they were just reassuring themselves that he hadn't moved and was still sitting there. I also noticed curiously that none of them sat with their back to the man, likely also subconsciously. I was just about to walk over and talk to him, to shake the odd feeling away, when Martin appeared in front of me, his brow furrowed. "Sir, my friends and I are worried about the other campers," he said. This drew my attention. There weren't any campers registered to be out here today. Was the newcomer one of them? Maybe they were in trouble. "What campers?" I asked with a frown. He motioned vaguely to the north. We passed their campsite on our way to the observation point, before the weather turned us back here. Maybe a half-kilometer up the trail, in a clearing beside a small brook. He cast a quick look over his shoulder at the stranger sitting in the corner. There it was again, I thought, that same unease. Martin continued. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. They had some of those cold weather tents set up and seemed to be well prepared for the storm, at least as far as we could tell. We stopped and warmed ourselves by their fire for a bit. They seemed very experienced and were not concerned about the cold, but I am no expert. "Well, it sounds like they should be okay," I said with the best reassuring smile I could muster. "They should have checked in with me, but if they're as prepared as you think, I'm sure they'll be just fine. When the storm passes, I'll head up there and check on them, just to make sure." He flicked his eyes to the man again, and then locked them with mine with a surprising intensity, like he was trying to tell me something with his gaze alone. He lowered his voice and said, "The campers, they were all wearing very good clothing. Sophia's brother is a climber in some very cold regions, and she recognized the camper's gear as similar to what he uses." "Even better news, then," I started, but Martin cut me off. "Exactly like the pants that man is wearing now," he said quietly. I looked over at the man again, once again taking note of his hodgepodge combination of clothing. The gloves he still wore looked to be thin and ill-suited to the winter weather, but looked well-made and would have been fine for a mild autumn outing. He still hadn't moved or said anything, and his emotionless eyes drifted slowly across the Spaniards with what seemed to my growing paranoia like a hungry interest. It was almost like he was inventorying them, evaluating them, somehow. Once again, that tickle in the back of my brain, telling me something was not quite right with the man. Something was just a little out of place, but I still couldn't figure it out. It set my teeth on edge. I looked back at Martin. "Are you sure?" He shrugged. "As sure as we can be. Sophia says she is certain, but the rest of us do not have the experience to recognize these details as well as her." "Was this man with them?" I asked, but I already knew the answer. Martin shook his head. "No, I have never seen him before now." He leaned in a little closer and lowered his voice. "This man, there is something," he said, trailing off, unable to find the right words. I nodded. "I know. I feel it, too." I walked back to my desk and opened a drawer, retrieving the holstered handgun and attaching it to my belt. The spare magazine went into my pocket, and I grabbed my heavy jacket from a nearby hook and pulled my fur-lined hat over my ears. Martin followed me, watching with interest. I looked over his shoulder, making sure we were out of sight and earshot of the bunk room. "I'm going to check on the camp. Have you ever handled a shotgun?" I asked. He nodded. "I hunt pheasant with my cousins every year. I am a very good shot." "Good," I said. "That doorway beside my desk is my room. Right inside you'll find a 12-gauge pump, loaded but not chambered, if you need it." He just gave a silent duck of his head. "I should be back within the hour. I know the place you're talking about. Keep him here until I return, but don't do anything if you don't have to," I said, closing my coat and making sure the zippered slit covering my holster was open and accessible. "Be careful, Jackson Turner. I feel some darkness in the air." I just gave a tight-lipped nod before opening the door and stepping out into the wind. The icy chill hit me immediately, cutting through my heavy pants and finding its way through every little opening in my clothing. The wind out here was a constant buffeting and howled in my ears. The snow along the trail was only a little over ankle deep, but tugged at my boots with every step, slowing my progress. The area that Martin had described was one of the few marked campsites along this area of the trail, and though it wasn't strictly required for campers to check in before setting up, it was highly encouraged. This deep in the woods, 20 miles away from the nearest town, the only real lifeline that anyone had were the rangers. If anything went wrong out here, the fact that you registered with the local ranger station may very well mean the difference between life and death. That didn't mean that everyone followed that rule, though. Most of the time, it was new campers, those folks lacking some of the wisdom of experience, that didn't know or didn't think it necessary to check in before setting camp. Sometimes, it was the opposite. Some highly experienced outdoors folks felt that there was no need, that they could handle anything that came their way. Either way, as I followed that northern trail, a growing unease began to color my steps. I felt the tight grip of anxiousness tickling my every breath. I didn't know what I was going to find. If I was lucky, I'd find 3 cold weather, double wall, silicone nylon tents, with their occupants snuggled warmly and safely within. If that was the case, I'd just check on them and turn back to my station, hopefully before the worst of the storm began in earnest. If not, well, I'd have to figure that out when it came. Asterisk. A half-hour later, I reached the campsite. Or, at least, what was left of it. The remains of what were obviously 3 high-quality winter tents were positioned compactly around a central fire pit, their bright red material shredded and torn and flapping violently in the fierce wind, looking very much like a lunatic array of flags in the heart of a hurricane. I pulled the ears of my hat lower, adjusting the chin strap tighter. "Hello," I shouted, straining to make my voice carry above the wind. Even with all my force, it still sounded pathetically impotent in the roar of the coming storm. "Is anyone here?" I waited a long moment, but could hear nothing but the rush of wind and the whip-like snapping of the nylon fabric. The campsite had all the hallmarks of a bear attack, except I hadn't seen a bear in months, and we'd never had a bear attack in this area that I'd ever heard of. It wasn't like the forests out west. We didn't have brown bears here. Black bears, yeah, but they were smaller and nowhere near as aggressive as big browns. Sure, they could be dangerous, especially if startled or threatened, but they didn't actively hunt humans. I took a few more steps forward into the campsite, drawing the Sig Sauer 10mm and holding it at low ready as I performed a quick visual of the tents. Nothing. No signs of bodies, blood, a struggle, anything at all. Just destroyed tents that could have been abandoned by the campers when the wind started getting bad and the fabric started to fail. And then it caught my eye. A flash of dark gray, partially hidden by the snow between two of the tents. Another 10 minutes of snowfall and I'd have never seen it. Moving closer, I towed the frozen bundle of cloth, overturning it before picking it up with my free hand, keeping the Sig at the ready. It was a pair of thick winter pants, old and torn and covered in dark red-brown stains that looked too fresh for my comfort. They were fur-lined and looked to be woolen. As soon as I lifted them free of the snow, the wind blew a familiar musky smell into my face, and I dropped them in revulsion. Another 2 feet beyond, the hint of blue in the white drift drew my attention, and I cautiously approached. I recognized the puffy material of a cold-weather jacket, and when I reached out to expose more of it, I staggered backwards in shock, realizing suddenly that I was looking at a crudely dismembered arm, still wrapped snugly in its warm jacket sleeve. I cursed aloud and stumbled backwards, tripping over the stones surrounding the fire pit and falling hard on my ass, eyes wide and not even registering the pain of my tailbone meeting the frozen ground. I sat there, hyperventilating, for what felt like minutes, long enough that the frigid chill was settling into my legs and backside from where I sat dumbly in the snow, eyes wide and breath ragged. It was only when my arms began to shake that I realized I was gripping the handgun as tightly as I could, aimed insanely at the gray mass of frozen trousers on the ground before me as if they were going to suddenly spring to life and attack. Shit, was all I could think to say as rationality suddenly returned, clearing the pulsating red spots from my vision and slamming my thoughts back to the present jarringly. The pounding in my ears began to lessen, replaced once again with the unrelenting wail of the wind. I leapt to my feet and started running back along the trail, back to my station, where Martin and Lucas and Diego and Sophia and the other girl, whose name I couldn't remember, sheltered from the coming storm with. With what? Was he some sort of psycho serial killer, stalking the lonely hiking trails of upstate New York? That didn't make any sense. I'd been here for 3 years and never heard of anything like this. As I ran clumsily through the snow, which was now halfway up my shin, I thought back to those gray pants, discarded in the campsite. They had been shredded, not just torn and ripped from age and wear. It had been something violent that caused the damage, and the bloodstains seemed to lend credence to that theory. So whatever had happened, the stranger had decided to replace his damaged and stained pants with what? Those of his victims? And then I thought about how none of his clothes matched, and how his boots and gloves weren't even suitable for winter weather. How long had this been going on? 20 minutes later, the dim yellow lights from the windows of my station appeared suddenly from the nearly white-out conditions that had overtaken me with the full coming of the storm. The temperature had dropped even more, and I was amazed that I had been able to keep up my pace long enough to make it back, driven by adrenaline and fear. I slowed to a halt before my ranger station, noticing immediately how the front door hung open a few inches. My mind urged me forward, to go racing in, but I had to take a few moments to catch my breath and let my racing heart slow a bit before I entered. I couldn't understand why the door was only open a few finger widths. If it hadn't been locked, the first strong gust of wind would have blown it fully open and sent it banging against the wood paneling of the wall behind it. But what occupied my thoughts far more was the implication of that open door. There's no way it could have been missed by anyone within, and nobody in their right mind would have sat in the station while the freezing wind and snow blew in through the open doorway. I pushed the throw aside and crept as quietly as possible to the door, pushing it gently at first, then with greater force as I felt some resistance holding it closed. I gripped my sidearm tightly, muzzle directly forward and at chest level, finger resting along the frame of the pistol and ready to drop to the trigger and go to work in a moment's notice. The door gradually gave way and pushed inward far enough that I was able to slide through the gap, the howling of the wind and the protesting of the building blessedly providing enough cacophony to cover the sounds of my entrance. As soon as I stepped inside, I found myself in the center of a fever nightmare. A body lay behind the door and had served as an impromptu barricade. I could only tell that it was one of the women by the delicate shape of the body, as the head and upper torso had been savagely mutilated, the skin and scalp torn away from the red white of the skull viciously. Presumably while she had desperately tried to make her escape from whatever hell had pursued her. Blood slicked nearly every surface around me, hot and stinking of copper, and I became aware of a wet, tearing sound emanating from the bunk room. The lights in that room were flickering chaotically, the hanging bulb in the center of the room swinging maniacally, as if it had been recently struck and was still settling its pendulum motion. As quietly as I could, I ducked around the doorway into the room, fresh shock coursing through my body in a cold wash that threatened my consciousness. Bodies and pieces of bodies lay strewn about the room haphazardly, most still enshrouded in bits of clothing, now tacked in place by sticky crimson. I could feel the heat in the room from whatever horrifying act of violence had occurred, from the bodies that now lay scattered about like discarded playthings. At my feet, I noted a handful of empty shotgun shells, where they had fallen and been arrested by the viscous gore that painted the wooden floorboards. The shotgun lay nearby, chamber opened and magazine tube empty, only inches away from the barely recognizable remains of the man I'd known as Martin. Terrible slashes and wounds covered his ravaged corpse, looking as if he'd been thrown into a shredder. His limbs were outstretched and only attached by the yellowish tendons and pink muscles which now lay open and exposed. My eyes were drawn at that moment to the source of the sounds I'd heard before, and I saw the crouched form of the stranger straddling one of the bodies, Lucas, I think, by the bright yellow of his North Face jacket. I watched in horror as the stranger dipped his head again and again, jerking it savagely each time it came away, as if tearing away more bits of meat with each movement. I noticed then that the stranger's hands had somehow grown, elongated, and taken on a shiny chitinous appearance that left the fingers as jagged and gore-encrusted claws. After only a moment's shocked hesitation, my reflexes took over and I snapped the muzzle of my handgun up and squeezed the trigger. I know that the thunderous blast of the 10mm must have been deafening, but I barely registered it as I watched blackened holes appear in the thing's back. It threw its head back in what I can only hope was pain and cried out in a shrieking screech that drowned out all else. I squeezed the trigger again, and another bullet punched its way through the horrifying thing. Suddenly, almost faster than I could track, the stranger exploded up from where it had been feasting and lit upon the wall, its terrible claws sinking into the wood and holding it in place as it turned its head 180 degrees to face me. The eyes had turned completely black and grown to the size of golf balls, and the jaw looked almost to have disjointed from its skull, the skin at the corners of its mouth drawn back in a hideous grin that stretched nearly from ear to ear, exposing a mouthful of shark-like triangular teeth, now stained bright red. It tensed, and an instant later it had leapt to the next wall, gripping the exposed wood like some monstrous insect, eyes fixed upon me. Before it could make another move, I fired again and again and again, my panic-induced attack miraculously finding purchase more often than not as empty brass cases ejected against the door frame next to me, ringing out like death bells. Then there was a long moment of silent stillness in the room, and its black eyes were fixed on me, still unnervingly cold and alien. I tensed, waiting for the thing to pounce towards me, but it was clear I'd heard it. I don't know how badly, but black ichor dripped from the half-dozen wounds punched by my hollow points, and I thought I heard a sickly rattling in its slow, deep breaths. With a final ear-splitting, otherworldly shriek, it leapt again, this time away from me and through the window at the rear of the room. The glass shattered outward, and then it was over. I stood alone in this charnel house, left only with the remains of the 5 Spanish tourists and the disconcerting awareness that the slide of my handgun was locked back, smoke lazily drifting from the barrel and the magazine now empty. Asterisk. That was almost a year ago, and I've since transferred from field operations to an administrative position within the Park Service. My office is located in the middle of a city, surrounded by people and without a lonely forest or dark wilderness in sight. After the investigation died down and the deaths were ruled as animal predation, I tried to return to my posting, but I just couldn't do it. They tore down the old station and built a new one closer to the trailhead, and I thought I could get past it, but I kept seeing that stranger, that creature, every time I closed my eyes. A few times in the dark stillness of the night, I thought I could hear that banshee wail echoing in the distance. Once or twice, I think I heard more than one. I slept with my handgun on the nightstand and the shotgun propped next to my bed, and kept the doors locked at all times. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there. Maybe searching for me. Maybe it needed to make sure that I wasn't able to tell anyone about it. You see, in the time since that horrible night, I've scoured the internet for any possible explanation for what I saw. I consulted any self-proclaimed cryptozoologist or paranormal investigator that would speak to me, but nobody had any rational explanations beyond fairy tales and urban legends. And invariably, I was left with as many questions as I started with. And then I tripped across an article one day that changed everything for me. It was a piece written about something called the Uncanny Valley, an idea put forth by some Japanese roboticists back in the 70s. At first, I almost passed it over, since it seemed mostly to relate to robots and computer graphics and how people feel increasingly uncomfortable the more realistically human they appear. But then I read a theory about why people may react this way and how it may be an evolutionary artifact left over in the dark corners of our reptilian brains. About how, at some point in our distant shared racial history, there may have actually been predators that looked almost human. They may have appeared so close to our ancestors that they were able to blend in with us almost perfectly. According to the theory, primitive humans may have developed a keen sense of facial recognition as a survival mechanism. This may have been passed down through genetic memories, fading just a little with each generation until today, where it existed as little more than an instinctive warning when we looked at someone who wasn't quite right. Someone who seemed almost normal, but perhaps with the slightest of imperfections that made them seem just a little wrong. Someone that our instincts told us didn't belong. Someone who wasn't really one of us at all. I wondered if these things have been with us all along, hiding among us, stalking us from within our own numbers. Yesterday, on my commute to the office, I noticed a young woman sitting by herself in the back of the subway car. Even though it was crowded, the seats beside her were empty, and I noticed that the other commuters almost seemed to be avoiding getting too close to her. I don't think anyone really realized it, but people kept glancing uneasily at her out of the corners of their eyes. There was nothing overtly out of place with her, and it could have just been happenstance that nobody had elected to sit down next to her. I just couldn't shake the feeling, though, that something just felt off. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.